Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss Sunak's missteps with regards to the schools building scandal. Not so much what led up to it, we know what led up to it. That's just Tory greed and a complete lack of risk assessment competence. I want to discuss how he should have dealt with the crisis politically and how failing to do so risks this scandal becoming his Partygate. He's certainly using Johnson's methods, which are proven failures. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, when faced with any sort of emergency, and especially a national emergency affecting lots of target voters, the government, of course, wants to come through the episode with their reputation either maintained, but preferably enhanced. In order to do this, standard political procedure to do two things. First, convince voters that the crisis was either someone else's fault or was unforeseeable. Right? Rishi Sunak is attempting that. He's just doing it badly. Second, convince voters that you are dealing with it. Well, he's not doing that at all. Now, note the word convince there in both cases. There is nothing in the political handbook which suggests you need to be free from blame or that you need to fix the problems. You just need voters to have confidence that you are going to do these things. For example, what has happened with the schools building crisis is just standard Conservative behaviour. If public money doesn't absolutely have to be spent on public services, they don't spend it. Their thinking will have been, well, the building's still standing, isn't it? Why don't we leave it till it falls down? It hasn't stopped them winning 3 general elections since applying these principles to all areas of government. So this behaviour, it doesn't cost you elections. We can see it doesn't cost you elections because they've won 3. So it's down to presentation. Now that the buildings are collapsing, what are they doing? They're not rebuilding them. They haven't said, oh yeah, these schools that are falling down, we need to build them. They're not saying that. They're not going to do that. They're just buttressing ceilings with metal scaffolding and renting porter cabins whilst carrying on with the very small rebuilding programme that has led to this in the first place. There's not even been a hint from Sunak that they will boost it. So the bottom line is what Sunak is telling you, if you are concerned by this, let's say you've got a kid in a school that is affected and they're having their lessons in the hall because, or at least some of them, because the classrooms for maths or science or whatever are in pieces. And you're thinking, well, when is it going to, I get that it can't be rebuilt straight away. When is it going to be rebuilt? As far as Rishi Sunak's concerned, maybe never. Certainly not in the lifetime, as in the school lifetime of your child. Even if they've just entered that school and they're going to be there for another 5 years, it still may not be done then, because he's still going to carry on, as far as we can tell, building 50 schools a year when we needed 300 to 400. You know, Sunak is desperately trying to pretend that this aerated concrete issue as well is all new information. That's what he's been trying to say. He's saying, oh, this is new. This is new. We acted quickly when we had this new information. But it's child's play to show otherwise. You can have a quick check on Hansard, which is the record of all parliamentary debates. You can find lots of references to RAEC problems to both schools and hospitals. For example, on January the 16th, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, informed MPs that the government were supposedly dealing with this very issue, specifically cited RAEC in schools. There was also part of the debate mentioning hospitals as well, but she was the Education Secretary. She was talking about schools. Concerns to be raised by MPs, she was addressing them. So there's nothing new about this. Essentially, we've got a record that the government knew that the presence specifically of this problem in old schools placed them at risk of collapse. If they were not rebuilt quickly enough, of course, they were being allowed to go beyond their lifetime. And so there's nothing about this current scandal which is new, other than more of the public know about it now. And although the general public are not going to trawl through Hansard, most don't even know what it is. It's child's play for either a Lib Dem or a Labour candidate to stick it on a leaflet if they think it'll do their campaign good in the local area. Instead of trying to pretend that this was all new, Sunak would have been better saying, yes, the government's been trying to deal with this issue and it's not something that Rome couldn't be built in a day, can't be done overnight, but we have been on it and that's why we've got these mitigations ready to go when problems emerge. He could have said that. It would have been absolute nonsense, of course, but it would have been plausible. And he should have prepared a schedule of repairs and rebuilds with work beginning on some of them immediately just for show. Because the fact is, it's impossible to get all the work. He can't start rebuilding them all before the election. Can't even start doing that. There aren't enough architects, builders or building materials available, even if the money was available. So putting the focus on the lack of available funds was just reminding people that it is in fact the Tory government who've left us without any money. After all, even after the banking crash, the Labour government was still increasing capital spending on education in real terms. That means buildings. Labour can easily stick that on a campaign leaflet as well, if Sunak continues to spend all his time dodging blame. What the public want are solutions. Absolutely try and dodge the blame. That's what politicians do. If Sunak presented to the public a schedule of building that told them when their school was going to get attention, and he started work on some immediately to show he was serious, it would look like he was getting things done. He'd still take the reputational hit, but he's going to take that anyway. Because right now, what are the public seeing? They're seeing the Prime Minister making so much noise with excuses that if he's saying anything about solutions, the public aren't hearing it. They're just hearing excuses. The only good news for Sunak is that it's no longer front page news. Not for today anyway. But for parents concerned about a school in their area, no news is not good news, because all they've heard is excuses and the PM and Education Secretary saying they deserve a round of applause for their efforts. And it occurs to me that Sunak is copying the way Johnson tried to deal with Partygate. It's just denials, denials and denials. But Johnson kept getting caught out in his lies. Labour can do the same to Sunak. Oh, we pin him down. Oh, we only found out about this. What is new, Prime Minister? What is new? Oh, the fact that this RAAC thing's an issue? No, we've got a record from you saying so at the start of the year. Okay, so that's what you say. Why does the parliamentary record show that you've been talking to us, MPs, and reassuring us about it all year long then? Sunak will no doubt come up with another lie. Then you just destroy that one. It's fairly well agreed that if Boris Johnson had come clean about Partygate as soon as it blew, he would have suffered reputational damage. There's no avoiding that. But the story would not have run. The reason the story ran is because Boris Johnson tried to get out of the accusations with a lie. Then more evidence was released to expose the lie. Then he told another lie and it kept going on. If it had just come clean and said, at the time, we really didn't think but we can see now, looking back on it, absolutely, we're in the wrong. It is, and I take responsibility, and I've now, made sure that I've put these things in place. And he would have taken a reputational hit, but that would have limited it at least. There'd have been no internal investigation, no police investigation, no privileges committee investigation. There'd have been nothing for them to investigate because he wouldn't have lied to Parliament. He would have owned up to it. He could still have downplayed the significance, put on a show of remorse, and that would have been that. But he kept denying his responsibility, making it worse. And it led to a sequence of events which triggered his downfall. Now, this school scandal is not as easy for Labour. After all, with Partygate, people were remembering those who died alone because of the rules Johnson was ignoring. With Sunak's scandal, nobody has died. Lots are having their education suffer, but those are largely invisible. Not many mainstream media reports on the impact of the kids affected, and no prominent reports at all that I have seen. But what if a child dies, or is even seriously injured? It may be a very low chance. It may be the Tories are doing just enough to keep a lid on it. It may be that propping ceilings up at least eliminates the risk of one falling on a child's head. But what if tragedy strikes anyway? If Sunak has been open about the problem, even if he downplayed his own responsibility, if he'd been open about it, if he announced this schedule of rebuilding, he would then be seen to be at least taking the issue seriously now, even if he hadn't before. Right now, he's not taking it seriously. If a child dies, he can't claim it was just an unforeseeable accident because there are now very public warnings about the risk. He'll be finished. Because as damaging as it would be for the Tories to go through another leadership contest now, no way they could keep Sunak as leader if something like this happens. Yesterday, Labour presented a motion to Parliament to force the publication of documents related to the decision-making process when Sunak was Chancellor. Now, Tory MPs were able to vote that down after the government published the much more important list of schools affected for the public. Had the government continued to resist that, the vote would have passed. But it still means that if this scandal gets worse in some way, Labour have got evidence that they urged the government to come clean and that Tory MPs, not just Sunak, Tory MPs, 309 of them, voted to keep hiding things from the public. Sunak is opening himself up to major problems here. Accidents do happen, tragedies do happen. But the way the Prime Minister has messed this up, if any harm is caused to anyone as a result of a collapse in concrete in a school or hospital or anywhere else, his reputation is done for because there were warnings that he ignored. And it will also badly damage the Tory party. And the thing is, it doesn't matter when it happens. Even if it happens in a couple of years when Labour are in government, okay, that's not going to impact their election, but it can impact the following one. Because as long as Labour can show that they have launched a reconstruction programme that is taking the issue seriously, that is replacing schools at the rate at which it is feasible to do so, won't be Labour's fault. All Sunak had to do was the same thing. Launch a programme of rebuilding. His government wouldn't have been able to do very much of it before the election. So he'd be leaving most of it to Labour anyway. Wouldn't cost him that much more because it'd be like drawing up plans to begin with, surveys and plans. Very little actual building. In fact, they'd only need a fraction of the cost of their Rwanda scheme to actually fix the whole thing. So as soon as Labour can get hold of a figure for what it's actually going to cost, it'll be a good opportunity to compare it to some of the more famous examples of Tory waste. Like I said, a government wants to get through an emergency with their reputation maintained or enhanced. Sunak has damaged his reputation here. But he's also ensured that the emergency will remain an emergency all the way to the next election because the public are not satisfied with what he's going to do about it. Which means that it remains potentially newsworthy all the way to the next election. Every time something happens, back in the news. Every time something goes wrong, Labour have another opportunity to say, we tried to get them to come clean and they kept blocking us. They behave just like Starmer said in PMQs yesterday. They're like cowboys, only instead of mucking up your kitchen, they are mucking up the country. Making a mess of their own work, blaming it on everyone else. And like I say, if something goes really badly wrong, Sunak utterly finished. And who really believes the Tories have risk assessed this properly? They have a history of calibrating their risk assessments towards whatever's cheapest. Take the Pandemic Response Unit, for example. Cancelled by Johnson just before a major pandemic hit because, well, you're spending money on nothing. They're not doing anything. There's no pandemic. So even though the government considered, since 2010, that all Conservative governments up to now, the number one threat to the country, global pandemic. But it's worse than that because the pandemic's hit. It's accepted now. Well, that was a bit short-sighted, wasn't it? We should have had that response unit. The government have still not reinstated it. We still don't have one. Reason? They probably think that because we've just been hit with a pandemic, there won't be another one for a while now, so why set it up? Their entire thinking is based around having no margins for error because when you come from a privileged background, as most of them do, errors are not costly. So we might assume that they think they have mitigated the risk of serious injury by propping up risky ceilings or jamming kids into halls for lessons. But they don't have a good track record of risk assessment. They don't actually risk assess. They don't allow margins for error. Most of us allow a margin for error when we're going to do something risky because we've suffered consequences. But if you don't ever suffer consequences, why would you bother with a margin for error? And what if they are still in the mode of not doing enough because they just think it'll probably all turn all right? Or they think they can deal with it as and when problems happen? Because that's what they've done. They knew these buildings were about to collapse. They thought, well, it might not collapse until after the election. That's what Gillian Keegan is reported to have said. Might not happen yet. What if they're still thinking like that? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.